Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of Cfa Society Sri Lanka, I would like to welcome you all for our webinar on taking ethical action in the age of artificial intelligence, big data, and Internet of Things. The Cfa Society Sri Lanka is being organized this webinar with a view to celebrate this year's Global Ethics Day to shine a spotlight on all things ethical. Today's virtual conversation will explore how businesses are preparing for an ethical future in the face of threats and challenges faced by globalization, technology, and human psychology. Also, this is a day to remind individuals and businesses of their ethical responsibilities and highlight why doing the right thing is so important. We are very pleased that we have an eminent panel of speakers who will shed a light on the subject matter. Ladies and gentlemen, with that note, it is my pleasure to invite Mr. Dinesh Varusavitarana, President of Cfa Society Sri Lanka, to formally welcome you. Dinesh.
Thanks, Aruna. On behalf of the board of, thank you, Aruna. On behalf of the board of Cfa Society Sri Lanka, I would like to welcome everybody to today's virtual conversation on taking ethical action in the modern age of AI, big data, and Internet of Things. This is a webinar we have organized to mark the Global Ethics Day. Ethics is at the core of an efficient capital market. Without ethics and ethical conduct, investors lose confidence, and the capital market ceases to play its role. Once investor confidence is lost, it is very hard to rebuild it. We have seen this happen in Sri Lanka in the past. As such, it is of utmost importance that we uphold strong ethical practices in the capital market, particularly in light of the evolving technology as we see today. At CFA Institute, ethics and professionalism have always been an integral part of our curriculum and are core to our life as a professional membership body. And we are pleased to promote Global Ethics Day. We at CFA Society Sri Lanka, in line with CFA Institute, seek to promote the highest standards of ethics, education, and professional excellence in the investment management industry. CFA Society Sri Lanka celebrates its 20th anniversary this year. Over the years, we have grown our membership to over 250 charter holders in Sri Lanka, and we have over 500 candidates as of now. I would like to take this opportunity to thank our keynote speaker today, Dr. Alan Locke, Director, Ethics and Professional Standards, Asia Pacific at CFA Institute, and our moderator today, Aruna Pereira, Vice President, CFA Society Sri Lanka, and Director Corporate Finance and Valuations at PwC, for their time and joining today to share their experience with us. I also take this opportunity to thank our sponsors, Colombo Stock Exchange, the platinum sponsor, and our silver sponsors, Equity Partners, CAL, Sinfin Asset Management, NDB Capital Holdings. I would also like to thank our media partner, Daily FT, and text messaging partner, TextWave. I also acknowledge the support extended by our partner organizations, ACCA, BCES, SEMA, FITIS, ISACA, SESCOM, and the National Chamber of Commerce. Without further ado, I would like to hand over to Arun Alvis to continue. Over to you, Aruna.
Thank you, Dinesh. So we thank you very much for those introductory remarks. Now it is my pleasure to introduce our moderator for the day. It is none other than Aruna Pereira, CFA, Vice President of Cfa Society Sri Lanka and the Director Corporate Finance and Valuation Consulting PwC. Aruna, over to you.
Thanks, Arunali. So I think today our session is on taking ethical action in the age of AI, big data, and IoT, and we have a very experienced resource person in this area. He's Dr. Alan Locke. He's a CFA charter holder. He currently works as a director for CFA Institute, covering ethics, education, and professional standards for Asia Pacific region. He joined CFA Institute in 2014, and in his role, he currently spends a lot of time in increasing the awareness and adoption of ethical standards among various communities, including the industry, the regulator, as well as the public as a whole. Without taking more time to introduce Dr. Locke, I'm handing over the session to him so that he can start his presentation. Thank you. Over to you, Dr. Locke.
Thank you, Aruna. Let me share my screen. Okay, can you all see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, everyone. Every year, we celebrate Global Ethics Day around this period of the time. And this Global Ethics Day actually came about because in the finance industry, we have been through a lot of turmoil within the past 100 years. We have seen the dot-com bubble. We have seen the 2008 global financial crisis, and during the pandemic, stock market crash in 2020. We have witnessed all sorts of turmoil. And to us, one of the most worrying part is the men in the street do have lower regards for us financial professionals. And these have implications on all of us, those of us working in the investment management world. If the public do not trust us, it will make our job very tough, and it will make us having to spend more time to deal with regulators, to deal with stakeholders, to deal with NGOs and our investors. So in order for to make the world a better place, there have to be some of us to stand up to reignite the very fact that we have fiduciary responsibility for our stakeholders, and ethics is at the very core of it. And it's particularly relevant in the age of ESG, AI, big data, and IoT, because while machine is going to cause a lot of us to lose our job, machine is going to cause us to progress faster, machine at the same time are going to make a lot of stupid, inefficient decisions when it comes to ethical dilemma. And that we believe machine can't rectify easily. And it requires us human beings to step in and do the right thing, more so than ever before. And in the light of this, let me proceed with my presentation today. It is an engagement, it's a sharing session, and feel free to pass me along any questions that you would want to discuss within this fruitful session. First of all, I will explain to all of you why we feel that being genuine in this new generation will become very crucial in the new world order. Following that, we will look at different practical options available where we are trying to take action to resolve ethical dilemma in our daily life. Subsequently, we will take a very in-depth look into a real-life case study where all of you will be invited to do your polling. I think we have 55% right now live. So if you can take out your mobile phone later and go to Slido, we can do a live polling on this. And of course, I will introduce some practical framework for taking actions. And following that, I will actually end the sharing session. Typically, this is part 2 of our EDM workshop, which typically lasts for 1.5 hours to 2 hours, but I have condensed the content by a lot. So it will take slightly less than half an hour, hopefully. First of all, please take out your mobile phone and go to this website called slide.do and key in the event code CFA, slide.do. I will activate the polling option, so you should be able to see the question right now, but do not press anything. This is just to showcase to you, you have gone to the right website. Any one of you that have problem accessing slide.do, and after keying CFA as the event code, if you don't see anything, let us know on the chat box. Okay, I assume all of you are able to access it, and if you don't, please let me know later on where we come to the polling session. First, let me explain the difference between yesterday corporations and future corporations. In the past, our parents will tell us our personal values stay at home. Work is work. Private life will always stay private. My mom used to tell me, in order to excel in your workplace, you have to follow the golden rule, MYOB, which is mind your own business. Whatever value system you have, you talk about it in front of your relative, your friends, but not your colleague. Your boss and colleague, your supervisors are professional associates. They are not your friends. That was what I was told. However, in future generation, our generation Z, which are those people that are born after the year of 2000 and 2010, etc., they will go directly for self-actualization. This new generation of professionals have a strong desire to voice out inequality in their workplace. Why? Because after technology have progressed throughout the years, most of us in this new generation, even for those of the Gen Z in the developing country, they did not undergo the era where the need to get food and water is paramount. Most of us have went beyond this level of subsistence. Most of us are now at level 3 of Maslow hierarchy of needs. Therefore, most of these Gen Z people, they wanted to make an impact. When they go for work, no longer are they just looking for a high-paying job. No longer are they just looking for a job that will give them a prestigious title. They want a job whereby the mission statement of the company is aligned with their personal worth. And this is totally in line with why all of us have witnessed the rise of ESG. Initially, most of us thought that the rise of ESG is just a fast-coming fad, come and goes in a short period of time. No, the more we look at it, the more it is to stay. And this is why we have a new generation of human beings. I call this the age of transparency, where things like 5G, Internet of Things, information flow will be very, very even. Within a company, when certain crisis or scandal once occurred, will be very hard to contain. Why? Because mobile video recording will render exposure almost instantaneously. Think of it, whenever we saw or witness an unusual happening, like a car accident, what is the common item that come out? Mobile phone. You're right. The passerby will quickly take out their mobile phone, and above it will be an iPhone or a Samsung to take picture of what's going on. And very soon, if that happening is very provocative or is a very rare incident, you will see it on the internet very soon. So in corporate, in the past, self-serving corporate culture become much harder to maintain. As a person leader, whether or not you are ready, the above environmental changes have arrived. Typically in the old days, many senior people will try to control information flow to maintain their power. This have occurred now, and it will still occur in the future. However, all of us know it's getting harder and harder. Therefore, as a person leader, you have to learn to adapt. You can no longer control all information. And in order to demonstrate your leadership worthiness, you have to get buy-in from people around you. You have to show that you are a worthy leader. You are a leader who is willing to empathize, willing to share your knowledge, willing to motivate people. No longer can you be relying just on controlling certain critical information to cement your leadership position. It is also known as the world of transparency revolution. And I will be giving you two examples to demonstrate why I have depicted the above the previous description. First of all, Wells Fargo. On 22nd April 2018, Wells Fargo's, one of the most famous banks on Wall Street, was fined $1 billion for a series of fraudulent operations involving 2 million fictitious customer accounts. It was discovered that ever since September 2016, which is barely 2 years ago, Wells Fargo staff had begun creating fake customer car and housing loan to fulfill their KPI. Well, this is the typical of the salespeople who are trying to churn out their sales volume, find dodgy ways to mushroom fictitious account, because they know that all they need is to get a year-end bonus, and after a few years, they will walk out the bank and go jump to another company. It has always happened, and it's quite common. And all this have occurred despite Wells Fargo's too big to fail status. The entire investigation from case filing to court hearing until verdict occurred in a relatively short period of time. And the scope of disclosure had been very, very transparent. In the past, when such thing happened in a too big to fail bank, if it's a big issue, it would have been controlled by the management and turned from big event to small event. If it is a small issue, it would have been discarded. But this did not happen this time around. Why? Because the top management are finding it very hard to contain it. The moment such thing occur and someone blow the whistle, it will very soon, very likely blow out of control. And top management have to think of way to ensure the way they handle it is transparent. Even the judicial system have to admit that with technology, it is very hard to cover up scandal. And that's why this has happened. In fact, during the entire court hearing process, it is no longer the usual case where the bank just hand up two or three junior staff, let them get charges and let them be the scapegoat. No, the investigation was very thorough and quite a few senior people were implicated. Uber, the next example. Not too long ago, Uber once again hit the headlines. This time around, it wasn't for a record-breaking refinancing, nor was it due to any state-of-the-art technology. In fact, it was for a rather embarrassing sex scandal incident. Interestingly, the entire episode was on social media within 24 hours of occurrence. I'm sure most of you know that the happening was a female young engineer was actually employed by the company, and she was sexually harassed by one of the superior who was trying to ask her for indecent favor. And when she reported this to the HR, the HR said that they will actually deal with this in an objective manner. In the end, the lady employee was told the HR give a verbal warning to the senior offender and make him promise that he will never do it again. But after that, no other further action was done. This female employee was very astonished. She began to question why this happened and how come no further punishment was taken. The HR replied that this offender was a senior employee of the company, and because of that, they preferred to let this matter pass by. And true enough, our female and this lady employee actually published the incident on a chat group, and within 24 hours, it was exploded. What followed suit was a PR disaster for Uber, followed by share price collapse and the dismissal of the related party. But most importantly, the entire episode eventually gravitated towards the stepping down of Uber CEO. This incident consciously reminds us of the lightning pace of modern news dissemination. None of us are safe from it. In fact, this is one good example to show us that even though with 5G, with Internet of Things, with big data, it has made our life much more smoother, but it has also put all of us in the limelight. And if you've done something wrong, it will escalate very fast out in the cyberspace. It is also the age of authenticity. Generation Z aspire for a career where workplace value join up with their personal values. And when it comes to big company trying to cement their talent acquisition program, together with the rise of ESG, for them to retain top talent, top management needs to generate enough social value to convince employees. Purely boilerplate support for ESG will no longer work. Top management needs to demonstrate clearly how the company vision can navigate the daily tasks of employee towards greater social cause. In the past, if you are an MNC and if you are the chief communication officer, all you need to do is to state that you support ESG on your mission statement or tell the whole world that you are green. That's it. People will buy you, investors love you. But if you do not walk your talk today, employee, stakeholders, customers are not going to buy that. They don't just look at your mission statement, but they also see how you behave. In fact, for big company like General Electric, they have this 6-month program. They have this short program for employees who have joined GE for more than 6 months, where they shared with this young junior employee how the top management of GE actually undertake policy formation for ESG matters. They let the junior employee understand how the CEO and the board make decisions to make sure they are walking the talk when it comes to ESG policy. Why are they doing so? Are they trying to groom these junior people to become management in the future? Not really. After all, how many of them can rise to become the what you call the top people within the industry or the top leaders within the company? Not all, only a handful. So they are doing all this to make sure that even the junior people have a clear understanding of how the top management are making decisions pertaining to ESG, so that these junior people can observe whether the top management are indeed walking the talk in the long run. Because the top management knows that the younger generation wants this and they want to be involved in this area. Now, for those of us who are in this new generation of ESG, ethics, big data, AI, disruptive technology, we are often at the crossroad of ethical dilemma. We know the background from what I have described. So what do you actually do and what can you actually do in front of an ethical dilemma? We have 3 choices. You either keep silence like many of our forefathers. It's not my matter, my own business. Or you avoid it. You change your job, you change your division. These 2 options are not advisable because by being so passive, you are not contributing to making the world a better place. What we should do is to voice out. Voicing up one's value might be a sensitive affair at times. However, first of all, when you suspect your colleague is potentially engaged in some unethical act, you felt obligated to voice out, but at the same time, finding it tough to do so. Why? During such scenario, most people will opt to stay silent. After all, the lesser you voice out, the less risk you take on. And even if you had to voice out, you wish you are not the one doing it. The second option, most favorable option will be avoidance. And this might mean a big move such as resignation or less dramatic, actions such as switching to a new team. Now, why are people finding it so tough to voice out? For one very simple reason. What if your suspicion is wrong? And when you voice out, you find that you have wrongly accused your colleague. Then you become the big evil person in the team. And people might ostracize you. And that's why there's a risk involved in voicing out. And if you keep silence, it doesn't affect you, fine, right? It looks fine, but you run into trouble in the long term. And avoidance is no longer a very good option. Why? Because if you simply resign because of this, then you have to keep jumping around for a new job. What happened to the human network, the human resources, the human relation that you established throughout the years? It would have all gone down to the drain. So this is not advisable as well, and it's not practical. A group of minority will opt to voice out, and voicing out does not necessarily mean launching a full-fledged attack on the target colleague. In fact, we are not asking you to go around telling that guy is doing something wrong. No, you don't do that. That is being too low on EQ. Besides directly voicing it out, there are lots of other alternative actions. Having said so much, let's go through a real-life example so that you and I can have a better understanding of how to take this sort of action in a real case. A case for discussion, Susan Fox. Susan Fox was a newly hired financial analyst at a major Wall Street bank. The bank has just been through major turnover, so many of her peers and supervisors were new to the job as well. As Susan began to understand the various clients and portfolio, she realized there was a serious backlog of work. Basic client status documents had not been updated for months. Regular client meetings kept being pushed back, and there seems to be a never-ending influx of phone calls from clients asking for updates. In response to the dire situation, the firm management recently installed a big data AI system to automatically reallocate the portfolio composition for their clients. Under normal circumstances, a new AI system needs to undergo at least 3 months of zeroing, where the algorithm learns from the firm's track records and historical market data to optimize its portfolio allocation alpha-seeking capability. However, the firm's CEO has instructed the IT engineers to skip the learning phase and directly proceeded to apply the new AI system in real time. So Susan spent her first 2 weeks on the job trying to get each client portfolio back on track, while at the same time trying her very best to comprehend the working logic behind the new AI system. During her 3rd week, Susan's supervisor barged into her office, asking her to drop everything and focus on one specific portfolio because he is going to have a meeting that afternoon with the client. When she looked at the numbers, it was clear to her that this client has suffered from the firm's recent restructuring. But it could not be ascertained whether this underperformance was because of human negligence or due to the AI premature portfolio allocation capability, or a mixture of both. On top of that, Susan also noticed that this client investment portfolio was small in relation to the firm's other clients. That said, the client was a friend of one of the senior partners, and his assets had fallen rather starkly. Susan figured out that her supervisor was looking for help to break the bad news to the client during their meeting, but to her surprise, Susan's supervisor asked her to revise the number and the benchmark in the portfolio so they would look more impressive to the client. Susan did not say anything at first. Dread took over as she returned to her desk. She told herself if she had been at the firm longer, she thought, it would be easier for her to put her foot down. But she was new. She did not want to make a bad impression, or worse, got fired because she refused to do what her supervisor wanted her to do. She questioned herself and wondered whether it would be okay to fudge the number just once. especially when she did not have a lot of time. But there was no gray area in her mind. If she changed the numbers, not only would it go against her own better judgment, but it would also be a violation of the bank's code of ethics and standards of professional conduct. And she kept thinking of the client, a retired gentleman who saw this portfolio as his legacy for his children and grandchildren. Put yourself in Susan's shoe. What would you do? Cast your vote. A, would you ask a colleague what they would do in this situation based on experience? B, tell the supervisor his request was unethical and refuse to do it. C, jump the hierarchy. Go to your supervisor boss directly and explain the situation. D, say that you will adjust a number, but actually do not do it so that the client end up seeing the truth. Tell the supervisor you are not comfortable with the request, but you could do it as a one-time off favor. Use this to your advantage so as you gain personal favor in front of him. What would be your option? I've already on the, oh, okay, the results are coming up. 4 of you have voted. 5. Again, please go to slide.do, key in event code CFA. Remember, this is a real life cases, real life situation. And I will show you how Susan actually did it and rectified the situation after this. Come on, we have more than, let me see, we have more than 50 of you here, and I only see 8 of you cast the vote. Let me key in the, some of you have actually put your answer in the chat box. Okay, most of you put B, 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 B. But I would rather you actually go to slide.do, slide.do, and key in the event code CFA so that you can vote on it. Let me show you the result so that all of you can actually watch the result live while it's changing. So far, I can tell you most of you vote the option, tell the supervisor his request was unethical and refuse to do it. Okay. And 11% of you actually asked a colleague what they would do in this situation based on experience. I'm sure you all can see on your mobile phone. And I think one of you come in and opt for go to your supervisor boss and explain the situation. So most of you actually chosen to directly tell your boss not to do it. Okay, that's interesting. You guys are very direct. So am I right to conclude that in Sri Lanka, the corporate culture is be direct in what you are thinking and uphold ethical behavior all the time? Okay, let me show you what did Susan do in real life, okay? First of all, Susan reached out to a fellow analyst who had been with the firm longer and briefly explained to him what was going on. She asked him if she was missing something. And he agreed that this was not acceptable, but it was blatantly obvious that he was glad that it was she and not he who was facing it. So Susan opted for option A first, but it was to no avail. Nothing came out of it. Thinking about her own career as well as the integrity of the firm, Susan did not think it would work to just run into her supervisor's office and say that this request was ethically wrong. After all, he might just turn to her colleague and ask him to do it instead. Susan devised an alternative plan. So option B was out as well for Susan. Remember, when I asked you to choose the option, there's no right and wrong. I'm just trying to make you think how you should react to this. Susan told her supervisor that she could not change the benchmark convincingly, but instead she would and she can provide an analysis to explain the portfolio underperformance at each point and show how they were addressing each issue going forward. To her surprise, the supervisor was fine with it. It turned out that her supervisor was not committed to being unethical. He was afraid of having a difficult or embarrassing situation or conversation with the client, and he thought that changing the number was the only way out. But Susan had provided a successful alternative, and they were both comfortable with it. So you see, it turned out to be a win-win situation. Susan got to keep her job. Susan prevented a situation whereby she has to collude with her supervisor to do something unethical. And it turned out the supervisor wasn't a totally unethical person. He's just temporarily being myopic. So what did we learn from the case study? Number one, in most ethical dilemma instances, we usually have multiple options. Don't keep yourself confined within a box. Never pre-label the target person, in this case, the supervisor, as an unethical individual. Try to think from the counterparty perspective. Simply scolding, pre-labeling, pointing finger doesn't work. Attempt to extract more information from engaging dialogues. Always think out of the box, as I mentioned before. And try your best ability to stay objective. And this is very important. Of course, I'm not saying that the way Susan approached this can be used in all situations that you ever encounter in your life. There might be situations whereby your supervisor is committed to be unethical. That can be very bad. But then I'm saying most of the time, most of us try to be good. It's just that we run out of options. So I hereby introduce to you all 3 recommended frameworks for handling ethical dilemmas. First, I call it the giving voice to value framework, which I have no time to go in depth, but if you guys are keen, do look out for our ethics learning lab, whereby we have this entire 5-module course for you all to take. Second, our ethical decision-making framework produced by the CFA Institute. 3, some evergreen lifelong wisdom. Let's go on to the GVV framework. In the GVV framework, giving voice to value, there are 5 points. Number 1, first step is to understand your own personality. Unless you understand who you are, what are your weaknesses and strengths, it's very hard to tailor-make a framework for yourself. And obtain a firm grasp of how information flow within your organization. If you can't do that, you do not know how to be flexible in your EQ, in your approach. Number 3, you need to erect your own core values. You need to have core values, because if you don't have core values that you subscribe to, if you don't have basic principle that you subscribe to, you will fall for anything. 4, repetitively practice repetition. Whatever you learn is only in theory, it's only a framework. You have to practice, you have to have opportunity to practice. It's just like you can't learn a new language like Japanese through watching YouTube video. No matter how long you watch the YouTube video, if you don't practice with a person, with a live person, it wouldn't go into your brain. Think strategically, think holistically. You must think from a top overall perspective. You cannot just be myopic and think of one point. In fact, the supervisor in our previous Susan Fox case is because he think too narrowly. Therefore, he only focused on that one solution, which is to fudge the numbers. But Susan was able to think holistically and come up with an alternative solution that created this win-win. CFA Institute EDM framework. We look at how to solve ethical dilemma, firstly through first stages, identification. Identify what are the key elements involved. Consider the different alternatives. Take action, very important, because if you don't take action, everything will stay as theory. And reflect on what you have learned. Whenever you take action, you might make mistake. It's okay. Making mistake is better than no action. The important thing is never fall twice in the same dilemma. Reflect on what you have done wrong or correct. Both can be your learning teacher. And this is how our EDM framework look like. As I mentioned before, during the identification stage, you must understand what fundamental investment profession principles are at issue. Who duty do you own to? What are the important facts to consider? What are the conflict of interest? I'm sure those of you who are chartered holder here, these are not unfamiliar to you. If these are unfamiliar to you, you wouldn't have passed your CFA exam anyway, because our code of ethics strongly places an emphasis on these elements. Second stage, consider what are the situational inference. Are there outside pressure or internal biases affecting your decision-making? Have you addressed them? What are the alternative actions and choices? Have you brainstormed multiple solutions to avoid a particular preconceived path? Don't be stubborn or too fixated on a way to solve things. What are the additional guidance you have sought to obtain an objective assessment? Have you considered how other people think of it from their perspective? Act on it. By making a decision, the specific action varies depending on the situation. Not some decision may require multiple action or none at all. You could even elevate the issue to a higher authority at some time. The best course of action may be to elevate sometimes, okay? Not all the time. Reflection on what you have learned. Once you have taken action, take time to review the path taken. This lesson learned will make future ethical decision-making quicker. And on strengths and weaknesses, regardless of positive or negative consequences, you can learn. And this is very important because after all, we need to train our ethical decision brain to be very much instinctive so that it becomes part of our muscle memory. This is the key. I will not go through this case because I don't think we have the time, and I will skip this. Next time when we have time, we can actually go through it, or we can look at the entire EDM workshop in one go. And last but not least, some evergreen lifelong wisdom I want to share with all of you. If you've forgotten whatever I tell you today, these 3 points will be key. If the act is undesirable on you yourself, you shouldn't do it on others. Very obvious. Birds of a feather flocks together. If you feel that your environment is full of toxic bosses, toxic colleagues who are out to use unethical way, shortcut way, short-term gain to benefit themselves, leave this corporate culture. It's not for you. If you stay there for too long, you will get influenced mentally, physically. If you always stroke by the riverside, your feet are bound to get wet. Beware of this. We are not sage. We are human beings. Always go with the right company. So I will stop here just in case it get too long-winded because I tend to blah 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 for too long. And I'm here to answer any of your Q&A and share with you my insights. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks, Dr. Locke. I think very interesting presentation, especially thinking out of the box, like in the case of Susan, to come out with a creative ways of achieving a win-win situation. I think that's a fantastic example, which actually achieves the objective. So till we get some questions, if you have any questions, please put into the chat box, sorry, so that I can ask from Dr. Locke. And till we get some questions from the audience, Dr. Locke, I have a few questions which I believe I can ask from you. So one of the questions that I have is, as you correctly mentioned, the business climate is becoming more and more complex. And it is demanding and competitive, and the competitiveness is growing. And this may motivate ambitious individuals, like in the case of Wells Fargo, to bend the ethical norms in order to become professionally successful, in order to go up the ladder or whatever. But you can also see individuals like Susan in the case study that you discussed, who think out of the box to manage these situations very effectively to achieve a win-win solution. I think it's a very interesting thing. I found it very interesting, the solution that this particular lady came up with. While preserving she protected the company, she protected herself, she protected her boss, and she achieved a fantastic balance. Can you elaborate on some more possible avenues that may be available to handle ethical dilemmas based on your experience in this area, Dr. Locke?
Sure, thanks, Aruna. Now, a lot of young people, actually I should use the word young people, a lot of us professionals, when we are handling ethical dilemma, we tend to be very short-sighted and myopic, just like how sometimes the stock market behaves. We think of this, since everybody is doing it, why can't we do it, right? We won't get caught. This is very dangerous because when you commit small unethical act, once in a while, you get through with it. You see, wow, I commit a small unethical act. Even if I get caught, it's okay, just a small punishment. Like jaywalking, the fine is just $300 US. It's small peanuts for me. But as you get into the habit of doing unethical act, you will get bigger and bigger. And the bigger the unethical act, the bigger the rewards, correct? Normally it's that way. I mean, it would be very dumb for a person to commit a big unethical act for a small gain. That is dumb, okay? And usually professionals don't behave that way. The greater the reward, usually the bigger the intensity of unethical or unethicness, if you have such a word. So we become incrementally habitualized to do unethical acts. So that's dangerous. So don't ever let the habit start small. That's number one. And number two, always think long term. Yes, people around you are committing unethical act. Your colleagues are committing unethical act, and they earn more revenue than you because they are willing to shortcut. They are willing to fudge the number to con their customer. Yes, you might envy their income. You might envy their sales commission, but do remember, the karma will actually come back, because once 5 days when they are caught doing the wrong thing, bad words spread around. And in the long run, they will not be in the industry anymore. In fact, even in the sales industry, like insurance and property agent, these are the two that I observe has to do with a lot of mis-selling, etc. Okay, the top selling people that I met always come back to tell me, if you commit unethical act, in the short run, you might make a lot of money because you con your client. You confuse them rather than you convince them or help them. But you will, in the long term, you will suffer from two things. Number one is the constant fear that one of these customers will come back and haunt you and punish you. That fear is always there because you know you are doing something bad to him or her. And one fine day, if that client discover that and he or she actually come back to look for you, whatever act is being done, right? And even if he doesn't come to you, you will always forever be worried about that. And that's called the power of guiltiness, self-conscious. And number two is the real situation where you finally get caught. Your entire industry, your entire reputation get tarnished. So if you start to think long-term and look out for example of people who gain on short-term unethical act, but in the long-term they suffer, you will be constantly reminding yourself not to do it. So my approach here is think long-term and be very, very vigilant about all this.
Thank you very much, Dr. Locke. I think what you said about habitual behavior, a lot of people start with small wrongdoings, and once they get away with it, either not getting caught or with a small punishment, then it becomes a habit. And ultimately it comes to a level even they can't control. I think it's a very important point that you made. There's no shortcut to the success. Thanks. Thank you for those comments. Let me ask you another question, Dr. Locke. My next question is regarding the COVID-19 pandemic. I think you had a case study also on this.
Yeah.
We can see that a lot of employees are working from home. And this has made the boundary between home and work, I think, unclear. And also, now data earlier stayed at office. Now the data has gone to home. So that provides a lot of opportunities for individuals to engage in unethical behavior. And tracking individuals' work or what they do may be difficult. So how should you manage this type of a situation effectively? without interfering personal lives, which is very important because we have to always respect, even if a person is working from home, we need to respect that individual's personal life. So how do you manage this type of a situation without interfering with personal life while making sure that there aren't any big unethical behaviors? What do you think an organization can do?
Well, this is a questions that many corporations try to ask, and it doesn't mean that when people are adopting working from home culture, this will be a bigger problem than in the past. Because regardless of whether you work from home or you don't work from home, big data, data privacy, all this will be an issue. It is just that when people are working from home, it sort of loosens the grip that corporations have on them. But mind you, one of the biggest problems facing all of us right now is the fuzzy boundary between private life and professional life. In the past, when all of us are working in the office, there's a fixed regime of 9 to 5 or 9 to 6. And after you knock off from home, you are free. Your boss don't look for you. But when we have the mobile phone, the pager, wow, suddenly you are 24/7 on call, especially for those of us who are doing sales. And right now, I think once we start the work from home, all of us who are employee, we began to find that we are able to have a work-life balance, and we are able to fulfill the demand that company brings on us, and it become a win-win. So I actually see this as an improvement. Because in the past, when people are in the office from 9 to 6, I mean, research has shown out of the 9 to 6, 8 hours, how much time is actually spent working? Come on, let's face it, it can never be 8 hours, okay? And research has shown that, in fact, I think nowadays, certain Scandinavian country has practiced 4 days working week. And when they do 4 days working week, they find that the productivity actually increase a lot. That means actually human being doesn't need that number of hours. Okay, so the problem is not enough hours spent on work. I would say not enough quality hours spent on work. Work arrangement need to be preset. Work arrangement need to be rearranged and remotivated from a human resources perspective to rectify how deep learning can actually occur. And part of deep learning is actually behaving ethically. I have no panacea solution for this. All I can say is that working from home, deep concentrated working is not for every job scope. Like for example, receptionists, like for example, delivery folks, or certain very crucial on the call that require physical presence. Work from home is no way. It's not for everyone. But it is available nowadays and suitable for most type of sedentary job. That one I have to admit. So I would say we got to find a way, a technology where it places a very clear boundary that prevent corporation from collecting unethical private data from their employee while they are at home. I mean, just to give you one example, you should not allow a corporation to insist that they install a video cam in an employee home to monitor his surrounding, to make sure that he's doing his job and not doing other things. This is too much, okay? In any culture, that's for sure. But at least the company can use big data, can use machine, can use sensor to collect feedback, to collect data point from the employer, from the employee workflow, to know to which stage he has already accomplished his work. That I think is doable. And it is programmable in a way to sieve out those data that would infringe on privacy and those data that should be considered the property of the company. That will have to be done by the programmer, and it has to undergo generation of ethical decision making. And that's why I say, in a future workplace, when IoT becomes full blown, you need people who are able to make ethical decision for this kind of situation. And for people who are able to make ethical decision at this kind of situation to determine what constitute privacy infringement, what constitute okay, they have to give this kind of advice to machine to make the monitoring. And that's why your ability to override all this, become very crucial in the future workflow.
Thank you, Dr. Locke. I think that, as you said, it's a continuous question that we hear from both the employer and employee. So it's important, as you said, to find right mechanisms to achieve the balance between the two objectives, making sure that the people do their work and also not interfering with the personal life too much. Another question that I would like to ask is, as you correctly said, the Generation Z is very vocal about ethical practices. And as you can see, they are gradually becoming majority of the workforce and organization. Recently, I read a report that this may even have impact on the voting patterns and the politics also, because by 2030, probably, Gen Z might become the majority of voters. So what they want may be different from what more senior citizens wanted. So when we look at the disclosures made by companies, we can see an increased focus on ethics-based initiatives such as ESG and sometime back for CSR. But still, every other day we hear an ethical scandal. And I don't know whether the severity and frequency of these scandals are increasing. Probably the severity and frequency is not increasing. What is happening is, because of these vocal workforce, things that were hidden earlier might be coming out. That may be also a possibility. How do you understand this situation? How do you interpret this contradiction?
Actually, these questions is always what we call a market integrity issue. Okay, it doesn't mean that a listed company, the more they disclose, the better it will be, because companies, listed company especially, they have the financial resources to employ very talented individuals to craft out boilerplate disclosure, which are not useful because they don't walk the talk. But what we are discovering is that in upholding market integrity, there are three pillars. Number one, regulatory intervention. Number two, institutional stewardship. Number three, investor education. We call it the caveat emptor. Why these three pillars? You definitely need the regulator to come in. If the regulator don't regulate and don't enforce, people are going to be cowboy, okay? But then we cannot fully rely on regulators, because by the time the regulator comes in, typically it's too late. The regulatory enforcement will work to send message to the public, to the listed company, that if you do the wrong thing big time, we are going to punish you. And this is to act as a so-called warning to the rest not to do bad things. But typically the damage is already done before they come in, typically. Institutional stewardship can only work if the big players do their part to safeguard the industry that they have vested interest in. While we do expect big companies, particularly those big companies that have fund managers, very big fund managers like BlackRock, like Ray Dalio, his fund, or even Warren Buffett, Berkshire Hathaway to invest in it. Then we have institutional stewardship, because they have the big boys watching at them. But it doesn't work for all companies, especially the small and medium cap, which might not be too keen to play the leadership role. So the third point, what we call caveat emptor, play a big part. We need the investor themselves to be aware of what are their rights as investor, what ethical right they have. So we need this group of people to be educated. And time can't be more right than Gen Z. Generation Z knows their right to investing. Generation Z knows what to look out for in disclosure, better than the senior citizen, as you mentioned earlier on, Aruna. So this group of people, they vote with their feet. They attend AGM, they attend EGM, they ask the right questions, and they send the message to listed company. You better answer our question in an objective manner. We respect you, you respect me. If you do not answer our question, we will vote by not investing in your company. So when we have a sizable size of this Gen Z doing that, it will actually send a wake-up call to all the company that did not provide enough disclosure, enough ESG disclosure, who do not walk the talk in their green mission statement, their share price will go down. They will find it harder to get bank loan because the investor doesn't buy their story. They will have a higher cost of capital. Whereas those companies that diligently disclose the right amount of things, diligently engage the green shareholder, diligently tell the whole world what they are doing right, what they are doing wrong. When they make a mistake, they're there to disclose on time and suggest rectification, like how Susan Fox did, instead of fudge the number, like how Enron, how Wirecard did. Then those companies will attract better investors and able to do that at lower cost of capital, and definitely be able to issue bond at lower yield. Then that is what we call investor education, serving as a third pillar to enhance market integrity. And that's why we at CFA Institute, we try to do produce material that tends to enhance the investor education, financial literacy. And one example would be the 21 sector book that we recently published after 7 years of work, which cover 21 industry, and enable investors, whether is it retail or institutional, to ask the right questions when they're trying to understand the business model, the ESG component of the listed company involved. This is just one small part that we do. We also have a whole team of people in our RAS team, research, advocacy, and standards that actually engage the regulators and also look at institutional stewardship. So we look at all three pillars at CFA Institute. Sometimes I jokingly tell our external stakeholders, I am part of the team that spend the money that is being earned from the exam, the curriculum, and make the world a better place. So I have no shame in spending this money to make the world a good and more ethical society.
Thanks, Dr. Locke. If you have any questions, please ask. I can forward it to Dr. Locke. I have one final question for our resource person. So you said in your presentation, Dr. Locke, that there are three alternatives. Either you can avoid or be silent or voice up. But there is a risk of voicing up your concern because sometimes you may be wrong. So my question is on that aspect. So my question is mainly on what happens then, because a whistleblower may bring into notice a perceived unethical behavior, and he or she does it with good intentions. But once you, as you know, once this type of a thing happens, it gets a lot of prominence. However, when you investigate it, you may find that it is a misunderstanding and there is no wrongdoing. So, however, you know that the good doesn't spread as fast as the bad, and the social stigma may stay with that individual who was wrongfully accused. So in the long run also. So how can we help if such an instance occurs? How can we help the accused, Dr. Locke?
This is absolutely a brilliant question. And that is exactly why I actually share with you guys the three framework that we actually have. You need to identify the situation and opt for softer alternative way to get more information, what we call intelligence collection, before you actually take a more firm questions. Never go for full-fledged accusation or point the finger or whistleblow until you are absolutely convinced that something is wrong. And even if you are absolutely convinced someone has done a hideous act, you should not go straight to whistleblow at all once, unless that hideous act has a very big and rampant situation impact on the company. That's a different story for another day, okay? Most of the time, it will not. So you should try to use indirect way of asking questions, opt for other resources, try to indirectly Q&A with the person involved, and try to find out more. And this finding out more, there's no pre-prescribed way of doing it. You have to rely on your communication skill. And that is why understanding the corporate culture, understanding how information flow in your company is very important. I have talked to individuals who have been with their company for decades, but still do not know who make decision. You will be surprised because there are some people who are so mesmerized in doing a good job. They become very silo, they work in silo and they don't understand how information flow. And that is actually very bad. So you first have to be a insider of your company culture before you can start to act effectively and ethically to solve all these issues. Don't voice out directly. That's not the way to do things. Voicing out directly will only make you an enemy of your corporate culture, especially if that person who you suspect is unethical turned out to be a mistake, turned out to be a so-called misinterpretation or misunderstanding.
Thanks, Dr. Locke. So if there aren't any more questions from the audience, I would like to thank Dr. Locke for very insightful. What I liked about your presentation is that it was very practical, rather than, because if you listen to ethics related presentations, a lot of people, what they say is go, shoot, hit. No, you didn't say that. What you said was find a practical way of solving the problem and achieve a win-win, which is very important, because otherwise it might not work. So that's why your presentation, I thought, is very, very interesting. So thank you very much, Dr. Locke, for your presentation. And so let's thank you very much, and let's call it end the session for today.
Thank you all. Thanks for inviting me. Thank you. See you next year. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thanks. Bye.